Alright, hello guys, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be talking about Hurricane Zeta. We're going to be presenting our forecast, all sorts of impacts you could expect along the Gulf Coast. This one's going to be a very, very potent one, so you're going to want to stay tuned to the rest of this video. Now, before I get started with this video, though, I would ask that you do subscribe if you do like weather-related content, and also make sure to share this video with your friends, family, and social media. Now, I'd also highly recommend that you check out our very exciting Patreon page. Right now, you can get it for much cheaper than a pumpkin, and I learned that the hard way personally. Pumpkins are so expensive compared to what you would think. Today, we actually made a post over on the Patreon page about the entire 2020 hurricane season so far. It's a really interesting post, and I highly recommend you go check it out. And look, if you ever want to cancel, you always can, but I'm extremely confident that you're not going to want to once you check it out. So go check it out in the description and the pinned comment down below. Now, for today's comment of the day, I want to know, do you think that Hurricane Zeta is our final hurricane of the 2020 hurricane season? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be picking one of those for tomorrow's video. Let's get into this video, and we're taking a look at the satellite imagery for Hurricane Zeta. Look at that. This storm is actually looking very potent for a Category 1. This looks a lot more like a stronger Category 2 or even bordering on Category 3. Oftentimes, they look like this around the time they're transitioning towards that major hurricane status where we start to see the eye developing. You can see it right there in the middle. The eye wall is also very potent. So either way, this is going to be a pretty strong Category 1, bordering on Category 2 actually by the time it makes landfall. Let's just take a look at NOAA's cone forecast real quick. And as you can see, later today it's going to be making landfall in Louisiana, this time around eastern Louisiana, and actually most of the time these storms have been hitting western Louisiana this year. But this time New Orleans is going to get kind of the brunt of this one. We'll talk about that in a moment, and I think a lot of people are underestimating this storm as well. We have hurricane warnings up for all of the red regions. We have a tropical storm watch there in that yellow region, and then for the blue we have tropical storm warnings there all the way for the Florida Panhandle, portions of Alabama as well. So this is going to be a very potent storm. We'll talk about the impacts in just a moment. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to move on and take a look at our spaghetti models, our intensity guidance, and then we're going to get right into the impacts. All right, now here we are taking a look at the spaghetti model guidance, and I wanted to show this just so you guys could see what they're showing, but really eastern Louisiana is in the bullseye, and we are fairly certain that that's where it's going to hit. It's once it reaches the east coast and moves offshore is when it gets a little questionable. That's going to be our snowstorm, by the way, which is really interesting. The snowstorm, actually, the models have kind of trended away from it. I'm going to make a post about that. I'm very, very glad I did not release a snowfall forecast on the YouTube channel yet. I did a very preliminary one on the Patreon page. But that was obviously very preliminary. I'm very glad I did not release a snowfall map to the public because this storm is looking fairly different, and the models might come back to what they were showing, but they're all over the place. And this is looking a lot like how the models were last year with, switching things up within 48 hours, which is extremely bad news for any accuracy going forward in these snowstorms coming up. So, yes, it's going to be a very difficult snowfall season, I believe, to forecast. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our European ensemble model real quick, and this one's a little more zoomed in, so I liked this one. It shows you guys exactly where we think this one's going to go and how far it could vary, but really we know this one's going to hit eastern Louisiana, and it's probably going to be within the range of where those spaghetti models are showing this one hit, so I think that was a really good projection there. What we're going to do here is we're going to move on and take a look at the intensity guidance, and then we're going to get right into impacts. All right, now here is our intensity guidance, and as you can see, we're at a higher level Category 1 storm. I do think we're going to cross over into Category 2 status just because of how strong it's looking on satellite imagery, but I think that people pay too much attention to what category storms are. This storm is going to bring major impacts, whether it's a stronger Category 1 or a weaker Category 2, and most likely you would not feel the difference between that. So I feel like people pay too much attention to which category a storm is when it hardly matters. There's a storm coming your way, and you need to really heed those warnings, especially from the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service. They're trying to save lives and give you the best information they could possibly give you on how to save your property and your lives. And whether it's a Category 1 or a Category 3, it is going to cause damage, and it is going to most likely harm people's lives as well, unfortunately. So this storm is going to be it's going to be a doozy, I think. So here's the most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds, and this just gives you a really good general idea of when to expect those stronger winds to begin. And as you can see, around 2 p.m. on Wednesday, that little dashed line there towards the bottom, obviously, that's going to be for Louisiana. So anywhere between 1 and I would say 4 p.m., we're going to see most of Louisiana begin to get those windy conditions. And then for most of Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, that's going to be later tonight, maybe around 8 p.m., maybe a bit earlier, a bit later. And then they're going to be moved well inland by the time we're reaching, the overnight hours tonight. And then in the morning hours tomorrow, we're going to see a lot of those winds for the Carolinas potentially, but the chances of that are much lower. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move on, and we're going to take a look at the probability of hurricane force winds. We're going to take a look at the storm surge map, the total wind map, the total rain map, and then we're going to take a look at one of our hurricane models that's been really accurate this year and just take a look at what it thinks the impacts are going to be as well. All right, now here is the probability of hurricane force winds, and if you're in those greens, you're kind of at like the lower chances as of right now, and in the yellows, you're at the about 50-50 chance. This is going to be, going up in the coming hours, so I don't want you to think that if you're in the greens, you have no chance of seeing hurricane force winds. This is actually rather high, and usually we see this go up with time. So you're really going to need to stay tuned to the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service for things like this as they update this. Obviously, I can't make, 8 videos a day updating this stuff. So you're really going to want to pay attention to what they're saying because they're able to update their pages, very frequently. So that's going to be your best bet for getting the most accurate and up-to-date information. Here's our peak storm surge forecast graphic. And as you can see, a general 5 to 7 feet there for a lot of eastern Louisiana, the very eastern tip. 3 to 5 feet there for portions a little further west. We see 3 to 5 feet there for the Alabama coast. And then for the Florida Panhandle, anywhere from 1 to 3 to 2 to 4 feet, which could, start to creep into some areas that are lower elevation. And even the Mississippi coast is in 6 to 9 feet. It actually looks like they're going to get the worst of the storm surge. So this is very bad news. That's actually quite high storm surge for a storm that is on this weaker end. And again, that's exactly why I was saying don't pay too much attention to the category because this is storm surge that you expect with like a category 3, but it's a much weaker storm. These storms each one of them is individually unique to themselves, and they cause different impacts at different levels, regardless of how strong those winds are that the hurricane hunters pick up. I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about the impacts on the ground, and I'm sure that's what you guys are worried about as well that live in these regions. All right, now here's your accumulated maximum wind gust, and this is according to the European model. This is basically just the maximum wind gust at any point during the model run. So this is a very useful graphic. And look, eastern Louisiana, I know not a lot of people live there east of New Orleans, southeast of New Orleans, but 90 to 105 mile per hour wind gusts are possible, possibly even higher. That is very, very strong, and I think this model is maybe overdoing this a little bit, hopefully. But yeah, very strong winds are expected, and if you're in those white or pink shades, that's where you're over 85 mile per hour wind gusts expected. If you're in those brown shades, that's where you're at about 70 to 85. The oranges and reds, that's where you're at about 45 to 70. And anything under that is more like tropical storm force. So yeah, very strong winds are expected with this one. What we're going to do here is we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the total rainfall, and then we're going to get into that hurricane model that has done very well this year so far, like I said before. Now, the surprising thing with the total rainfall is it's actually not expected to be that high with this storm, and that's been something I've been eyeballing. I've been talking mostly about that snowstorm. I wanted to make a final forecast for this storm, though. So, really, a general 1 to 4 inches of rain seems to be the most likely outcome here. There is some areas that appear to possibly get close to 5 inches, but that isn't very major for a hurricane, and it could obviously be a lot higher than this, but the expected rainfall is just not very high for a storm of this magnitude, which is very interesting. Again, every storm is different because this is like tropical depression level rains, in a potentially category 2 hurricane. So again, these impacts are just varying so much, and that's why it's not even important to pay too much attention to if it's a category 1 or a category 2, because we're getting tropical depression rains with like category 3 looking satellite with, category 3 storm surge, but maybe like category 1 winds. It's just all over the place. And when you pay too much attention to the category, you don't really seek the proper precautions for the coming storm. It's more important to pay attention to the expected impacts. Now, here is this morning at about 8 a.m. on our HWRF. It's been the best hurricane model this year so far. And it's expecting that, because I'm making this video earlier than 8 a.m., it will be out at about 8 a.m., so it might be a stronger or weaker storm by that point. But at 8 a.m., this model was forecasting the storm to be at about 978 millibars. And then as it's approaching landfall, 974. And then at landfall, we have 974. So this storm is going to remain strong, and it's actually going to be lowering in pressure as it approaches landfall, which means it will be intensifying. Very, very interesting. Let's take a look at the winds quickly. And at about 8 a.m., 82 mile per hour winds is the max here. But as we're approaching landfall, 91 miles per hour. So this storm looks to possibly be intensifying as it's approaching landfall, which is very bad news. And after landfall, we see 90 mile per hour plus winds there. And they're actually going to be pulling this. A lot of these regions, Louisiana is kind of shaped like a bowl there. Unfortunately, that is what causes a lot of issues for that region. And the winds are going to be pushing straight into the bowl, which is very bad news for storm surge. Here's just a look at simulated radar so you can see what it would look like. And as you can see, very, very intimidating looking. But again, not too much rainfall is actually expected with this one. For our comment of the day, I asked you guys, which states do you think will see the most snowfall with this snowstorm? And again, the snowstorm has actually changed significantly. I'll probably be updating that tomorrow. But for the question of the day, Toby Bartlett said, I think that New York and Massachusetts will get the most snowfall. I live in Massachusetts, and I have to agree, actually. The models have trended further and further south, which actually means less and less snowfall overall. But the southern regions will probably see a tiny bit more snowfall than they were expecting. If that is the case, there is still some models. I think it'll be a bit further north and a bit more major. But this storm has really shifted how it looks within the past, 12 hours, which is exactly how last snow season went. These models were all over the place, and it appears like that's going to be the case this year. Anyways, for today's patron highlight of the day, I want to thank you all for supporting the channel, but especially our diamond patrons, Michael, Caudelessa, Madbirds, Rosemary Haynes, Alicia Davis, Catbite, Terry Curtis, It's Jay, Cindy Klein, Kellen Manhart, Michael Buell, Mariah Vieira, and Mark J, alongside our platinum patrons, Alan Belemo, Adam S., Donna Carnes, Dovie Nagel, James Wade, Larry LePan, and Cameron Marshall. Anyway, I want to thank you all for supporting the channel. If you would like to be on this patron end screen, you can do so by, again, checking out that Patreon page in the description and the pinned comment down below. You won't regret it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, please, please, please stay tuned in the National Hurricane Center. I can't stress this enough. The reports I'm hearing is that people are really underestimating this storm in New Orleans especially, but as a whole in Louisiana. Please do not do this because this storm in many ways is looking to overperform like storm surge and winds, things like that. So really, really heed those warnings that the National Hurricane Center is putting out. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, family, and social media. I will see you guys in the next video.